It's there.
I see it, Sally. We'll wait just 2 more minutes till 6:30 and then we'll get started. Okay, it is 6:30 and I know that we have our supervisors here, so I had directed them to turn their cameras off for a few minutes while we were just making sure that the YouTube channel was working, and it appears that everything is up and ready to go. So we're going to begin on time.
Okay, it is 6:30 and I know that we have our supervisors here, so and it appears that everything is up and ready to go. That we have our supervisors here, so
if anybody's still in the YouTube channel from the supervisor group, let's pop out. Are you guys hearing that echo when I was unmuted?
Everything is up and ready to go.
Okay, give me one. Okay, can everybody still see what's happening on YouTube? Anybody from my team that's still in? I think it might have been my screen that was causing the disruption. Okay. So thank you for bearing with us for a moment. This is our first time using the YouTube channel, so we're just trying to make sure all the pieces work so everybody at home can hear and see us. So again, just thank you to all of our families out there who are joining us for the first time on our pupil services page on YouTube. We thought this would be a great way to make sure everyone could be included in hearing the information for our compensatory services program. We met earlier in the school year and discussed some of the main details for compensatory services, just sort of outlining what they were and how we would be collecting data to help determine whether or not students needed compensatory services this summer. Tonight's presentation is going to focus on what we plan on doing for implementing compensatory services. And when we spoke last, we had talked a lot about not really knowing how the rest of the school year was going to play out in regards to hybrid versus full-time and how we would potentially implement services for students through the compensatory services plan. Now that we're heading towards the end of February, beginning of March, we have a better sense of how the end of this year is going to play out and how we can best provide these compensatory compensatory services to students, with the main focus of really providing in-person instruction for students for their success and to help them gain back some of the skills that may have been lost during the time from March till June of 2020. So just to share a little bit with you, our plan for the summer is to take our ESY programming and extend it through the summer weeks in order to implement compensatory services alongside our ESY services. So we've kind of taken what is typically ESY and grown it into a larger platform so that we can manage our ESY programming for students as well as our compensatory services for students. So what that means is we'll have a longer window, and we'll show you the schedule for that in just a moment. It also means that we'll be providing instruction in person to students this summer. Again, as we had talked in the fall, it's really important that these compensatory services happen in person. One of the reasons why we're providing these services is because of the disruption to school and the virtual model. So we want to make sure that we have that in-person model in place for students in order to receive those compensatory services. For both ESY and compensatory services, we have identified students. We are still in the process of identifying some students, but we've done a bulk of our identification, and we will be working on targeted goal areas to support students during ESY and comp services. So they will follow a similar model and for students in order to receive that instruction. Our low incidence programs will operate similar to the way that they do during the school year. So their day will look similar, as well as their time for typical ESY time in years previous in the secondary level. It'll look similar to that this summer as well, and that includes our transition and work program. Again, we'll be looking at specific programs to target the skill areas that students have qualified for, both in ESY and compensatory services. So our team is working now to look at students and see what goals they're qualifying for, what programs we need to put in place in order to help them make progress towards those goals, so that they are ready to come back in the fall and be in good shape to start the school year. Students will be grouped by those goal areas, and those programs will be selected. So we're looking at students that have like goals, working on similar skills at similar levels, and putting them into groups and providing that instruction in the summer weeks. We are aware also that we do have secondary students who may qualify for compensatory services or ESY or both. That may also need credit recovery at the secondary level. And so while we don't know who those students are at this moment, we still have 2 marking periods left at the high school level. We are aware that there may be some overlap and that we're going to have to accommodate for those students who need to manage not just one thing that they have to accomplish this summer, but multiple. So if they're doing compensatory services or ESY or perhaps both of those things and also need credit recovery, we are looking at some options to make sure that we can support them in those credit recovery courses along with their ESY and comp services as well.
So our dates, times, and locations, you'll see 3 different descriptions up here in this top box here, and I'll explain each. So if your student is compensatory service only, your child will be attending from June 14th to July 9th, Monday through Thursday. If your child just qualifies for ESY, they're going to be attending June 14th through July 16th, Monday through Thursday. Now, many of our students qualify for both. So in that case, they're going to start June 14th like everybody else, and through July 9th, they'll be attending Monday through Friday. And this is because we're going to use that time Friday to make up another week of comp services. So they also will get 2 weeks added on the back end, July 12th through July 29th, Monday through Thursday. Our times are going to stay the same for consistency purposes. So elementary, they're going to start 8:30 and go till noon. Secondary will be 7:30 to 11. And then our secondary low incidence programs at the high school will go 7:30 to 1. This year's a little bit different in terms of locations. This is partly because, we're not entirely sure what the 6-foot restrictions will look like, so we needed a bit more space. We're expecting more students in our summer program this year. So we're looking to have elementary housed at Shimona Creek and the Marsh Creek 6th grade center. And since the two buildings are on the same campus, this is going to provide some flexibility for, our staff and the students, being so close to each other and utilizing the playground, et cetera. Secondary, we plan on using DMS again, and we're going to look to keep the programs that are at West High School at West High School. So again, within walking distance of the campuses.
Our programming for ESY and comp services, again, as Ms. Dennis alluded to, is going to look a little different, but there are some similarities to ESY. So traditional ESY has been offered for maintenance of skills. We look to try to not make new progress, but really address the concern of recoupment and regression. However, this year, we're actually going to because we're doing an integrated model, we're going to do a continuation of learning. So not reinforcement of skills, but more so everyone's going to be progressing forward. As Ms. Dennis also described, we're doing program-based. So we are going to look at those similar goals. We're going to look at the programs the students are currently using and group the students according to their need and target those specific skills that they qualified for both ESY and comp services. For related services, we're looking at a couple different things. We're trying to obviously manage the time that we have. So potentially, we're looking to start related services, comp services for the spring of 2021. Of course, we know it's an ever-changing world and nothing is set in stone at this time. If we're able to start it, we're certainly going to look towards start implementing some of those services. If not, or if we need more time, we're going to look to offer those 30-minute related service sessions during our ESY and comp service model. Lastly, as indicated, we're looking at that high school and credit recovery. So we understand that there are some students who qualify for both comp services, ESY, and executive functioning needs. We identified that perfect integration of executive functioning and credit recovery could work for these students who have that need. So we're going to continue to look at that model, and we're going to look at those students who could potentially benefit the most from that. The similarities are going to follow very similar to what our ESY programming has been set up in previous years. So for eligibility of services, if you're looking at the left column there, 1 or 2 times per week, up to 3.5 hours per day, a student could receive reading support, math support. We are doing English language arts this year. So if you are a family who's been with us and who has participated in ESY, you'll know that this is something new that we haven't provided to students in the past. This is going to be a mixture of both writing and reading, as well as we're offering writing support this year as well. That would be a total of 3.5 hours of support in one given week. If you look to the right, it says the eligibility for all day services, which is 3.5 hours per day, 1 time a week, or we're doing pull-out models. So again, if you're familiar with ESY, our social skills, both for autistic support and emotional support, have run as a pull-out program when they qualified for additional service. So for example, if a student qualified for reading and social skills support, they would be pulled out of reading for 30 minutes to be provided that instruction so they're able to be pushed back in and generalize that skill set, which is the ultimate goal, is generalizing those social skills. If they do not qualify for anything else, they will come one day to receive up to 3.5 hours a day of that direct, immediate instruction. Similar for executive functioning, we're going to run it very similar to the social skills support, is if they qualify for something else, we can push into a 30-minute pull-out program with the idea of generalizing those skill sets, or if they just qualify for executive functioning, they will have one day dedicated to that skill set. For vocational training, students who are eligible for the community-based, we're hoping to have most of our partners back on board. And we are going to, again, be in person and pushing in the community for 2 to 3 hours vocational shift, 1 to 2 times per week. And then lastly, eligible services for 3.5 hours per day. which is our K through 8, which is consistent of our elementary, or 5.5 hours a day, which is our secondary low incidence, are going to be our artistic support programs, life skills, MDS, and transition program. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Barrios to talk about the IEP revisions.
Thanks. So similarly to extended school year, where we complete IEP revisions in the spring, where we will complete them for our targeted population by February 28th, and for all other students in March, the same will be true for compensatory services. So case managers will be reaching out to you shortly to have these IEP revisions, and we will be listing the compensatory services in the specially designed instruction section of the IEP. Whereas ESY, later on in the section of the IEP, has the location where we can list the type of service, frequency, location, and dates. We do not have that for compensatory services. So that's why we are going to utilize the specially designed instruction section. So it will list out what services will be received and when. So these meetings will occur either at the spring annual IEP meeting or through an IEP revision. And this revision can occur as a no-meet IEP revision, either through phone or email, whatever you're most comfortable with communicating with your case manager. And if parents would request to have an IEP meeting, that will occur as well and be scheduled.
So lastly, we just wanted to talk a little bit about what will happen in the 2021-2022 school year. First and foremost, our hope and our goal is that we have all students back in 5-day in-person instruction for the start of the 21-22 school year. We are aware that we do have some students that were virtual all this year, and there's a small percentage of students who had particular goals that really required in-person instruction as well as in-person data collection for that progress monitoring. Those would include some really specific social skills goals or some really specific executive functioning goals that we were not able to find other alternative ways of gathering that data for this school year. So again, it's a very small number of students, but we want to make sure that we acknowledge that some of those goals might still be outstanding by the time we get to this summer model for compensatory services. And so what will take place in the 2021-2022 school year, we would continue to collect data once we have students back in person, gather that data on those goals for 4 to 6 weeks, and then make some determinations about whether or not that student needs compensatory services. And we would look to implement that around the school day schedule. If you remember from our parent presentation in the fall, compensatory services can't supplant something that the child is already receiving. So we can't replace a time in their school day where they're receiving other instruction with compensatory services. So once we get to that point and we have students who maybe in the 21-22 school year need some services through compensatory services, we'd be looking at either a before or after school model to address, again, those very small group of students with really targeted skill areas that we may still have outstanding at the start of the school year. We will be doing data collection just like we do in our typical ESY summertime, and that information will get shared with case managers when they come back to school in the fall, so that they'll have a sense of how that student performed over the summertime, so that we can compare that to benchmarking when we have students that come back, when we have students coming back in the fall and taking a look at where they were and where they are when we start off the 21-22 school year. If you have questions regarding compensatory services or how students progress in the summer and their comparison to the start of the school year, you can direct those questions to case managers in the fall or the special education supervisor for your building. And they'll be happy to address any new information, review any information with you from the 2021 school year heading into the 21-22 school year. We recognize that student data at this point in time is really important for us to sort of analyze where students are and how their progress is going as we sort of look at what's happened now that the school closure has ended and we're heading back more towards a normal school functioning. So before we go to questions, and we received a few questions through the Google form that I sent along with the link to the YouTube channel, I just wanted to summarize so our plan for this summer is to take what we traditionally do for ESY and make it longer and bigger, so that we can encompass our compensatory services within the ESY model. So all students who qualify for ESY will get their ESY model and the same amount of hours and time as we have in past years. And we're adding on to that the compensatory services model as well. So all the dates that Mr. Otto shared with you really encompass for whether, whether students qualify for just compensatory services or they're qualifying for that as well as ESY, we can account for all that time and provide students with instructional minutes, with really structured research-based programs in their targeted skill areas for what they qualified for those compensatory services. So again, case managers, we're working on working with them to make sure that they have the language to be able to support you in adding SDI to the IEPs for those compensatory services. And as Dr. Barrios said, there's no compensatory services section to an IEP because it's not typical practice. So that's why we're utilizing the specially designed instruction section of that. So you'll see two places potentially in your child's IEP for summer supports. If they qualify for compensatory service, it'll be in their SDI. And if they qualify for ESY, it'll be in that lower section where the IEP specifically addresses whether or not the child qualifies for ESY. Those details will be there. If you have questions after our meeting tonight, you can certainly reach out to me directly, or you can reach out to the supervisor for your child's building. To cover the questions that we did have parents submit through the Google form, I'm going to stop my share so I can take a look at those. Just give me 1 second to get to the right screen. Okay, so the first question was regarding potentially using differences services for their child for the summer programming. So the offer for compensatory services will be the district's offer for that. If you are seeking some alternatives to that model, that's something you would want to speak directly to your child's case manager and special education supervisor about. So I had a parent request or ask the question, is the district going to offer funds over the summertime for alternative summer programming, or if there will be any monetary compensation for compensatory services. And that is not the model that COVID compensatory services follows. That came from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Compensatory services are meant for services. So it's what the district provides to replace instruction that would have been lost from the March to June time period of 2020 when schools were using their continuity of education versus what would have been a typical FAPE offer for a child. So it's not monetary, it really is the service. But again, if you have alternatives or things that you need to discuss with your special education supervisor, you can reach out to them directly. The next question was, how will significant loss of on-site vocational training or on-job training be addressed or recovered? So again, by expanding the time for ESY and those compensatory services, we'll be giving those students a longer period of time to do those vocational pieces that they typically do in the summer for ESY. Mrs. Bankus explained that it has been a struggle this year to have those community partners. We're hoping to regain some that had to opt out this year due to COVID and some of the health and safety guidelines that they had to follow that were different from years past. So we're hoping that we have them come back to us. We also are always seeking out new community partners and sort of use our resources as we can to identify new partners to bring those numbers back up. But the goal over the summertime by extending that ESY window is to make sure that students have more opportunity to be out in those working opportunities for them. And then the last question that was submitted to us had a couple parts, so I'm going to start at the first. Will services be offered to students after school after ESY ends? So again, compensatory services are going to sort of meld into ESY, and we're going to extend our window. So it will be an extended timeline. So instead of running from just the very end of June to the very end of July, we're starting earlier in June, really the week after school it's out, and going all the way through to the end of July. So again, students will have their month of August to enjoy summer, hopefully go on vacation with family, and have some of that summertime before coming back to school at the end of August. The second part of that question was, will they be held virtual or in person or hybrid? So again, we will be fully in person for ESY and compensatory services. If there is a mandate that goes beyond what we are able to, decide for ourselves here as a district, that would potentially change compensatory services for us if we're not able to provide them in person, we may pause on that, because again, as we've said multiple times, the whole purpose of compensatory services is to provide your child with in-person instruction. ESY would be a little bit different. Just like last summer, we have to provide those opportunities. So if there is some barrier that we're not able to cross as far as having students in person, then we would have to go back and look at that ESY model again, as we did last summer, to address those ESY needs. But again, barring any sort of mandate, we plan on being in person with students for compensatory services and extended school year. And I think that was the last, and the last question was July 1st to August 1st. So again, we're extending that window and starting on June 14th and extending to July 30th. So that will be the window for compensatory services and ESY. So that is our broad overview of compensatory services and ESY and how we'll be presenting them both this summer for students with special education needs. As the team has kind of shared collectively here tonight, we plan on having teachers begin the process of reaching out to our families that qualify for compensatory services. You may have already heard from case managers in regards to ESY. If you've not, that's coming as soon as well. And we will be putting all those pieces together for you in the IEP. We certainly can do that through that meeting list revision, as Dr. Barrios stated. So, if you've had your IEP meeting, in the interest of saving time, we certainly can share the proposed plan with you, put them in the SDI, and send you the NOREP to sign and approve. If you would like an IEP meeting, you certainly can request that as well. And we will hold an IEP meeting to review in more detail the services your child will receive. So in the IEP, you'll get information about how many hours, how much service they're going to get. And then as we get closer to the summer, we'll make sure you have a nice clean schedule of the days and times that your child will be attending ESY. So don't panic if some of what it looks like in the SDI section doesn't equate out to a clear picture of, Mondays, Tuesdays, and whatever day of the week you're going. We'll be providing you with that information as well as we head further into the spring and have a little bit more of a sense of our groups and the instruction that we'll be providing on each of those days. So again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your supervisors or your case managers, and you can reach out to me directly as well, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. So we thank everybody for signing in with us tonight, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week and that you stay warm in the impending snow that's apparently coming at the end of the week. So